My name is Jessica Wilson, and I'm 17 years old. Standing barefoot in the snow, I wrapped my arms around my thin pajamas as the blizzard raged around me. My own mother had locked me out and told our neighbors to ignore my desperate knocks. With temperatures plummeting and darkness falling, I had no choice but to knock on every door until someone helped me survive. Before I tell you how I made it through that night and what happened afterward, let me know where you're watching from in the comments and subscribe to hear more stories of survival against impossible odds. Growing up in our small two-bedroom house on Maple Street, life hadn't always been this way. My mother, Diane Wilson, raised my younger brother Tyler and me mostly on her own after my father walked out when I was 8 and Tyler was just 5. In those early days after Dad left, Mom was our rock, working 2 jobs, making it to school events whenever she could, and always finding ways to make birthdays special even when money was tight. I remember how she'd braid my hair before school and leave little notes in my lunchbox. My brilliant girl, she'd call me, beaming with pride when I brought home straight A's. Tyler was her little man, the spitting image of our father, but with a gentleness our dad never possessed. We were a team, the 3 Wilsons against the world, and despite the financial struggles, we had each other. The change happened so gradually I barely noticed it at first. Maybe it started when I entered high school and began talking about college possibilities. Mom's smile would tighten just slightly when teachers praised my potential. "Just don't get your hopes up too high," she'd say on the drive home. "College is expensive, and not everyone gets to leave this town." By my sophomore year, Mom had been promoted at the insurance office where she worked, which meant we could finally afford extras like new winter coats and occasional dinners out. But as our financial situation improved, Mom's behavior became increasingly unpredictable. She started having wine with dinner, then wine before dinner, then wine instead of dinner. Her eyes, once bright with determination, now often appeared clouded and distant. I took on more responsibility at home, helping Tyler with homework, preparing meals, and doing laundry. I stopped mentioning my achievements, having learned that my success somehow seemed to cause Mom pain. When I was selected for the National Honor Society, I told her it was just some school club. When I scored in the top percentile on my SATs, I kept the results in my backpack until she found them while looking for a permission slip. "You think you're better than me, don't you?" she'd said, waving the paper with my scores. "Planning your great escape while I'm stuck here forever." "It's not like that, Mom," I'd pleaded. "I just want options." "Options to leave us behind," she'd muttered, dropping the paper and walking away. Mrs. Larson, my English teacher, noticed the change in me during junior year. Once eager to participate, I'd become quieter, more withdrawn. She kept me after class one day, asking if everything was all right at home. "Everything's fine," I'd said automatically, the response I'd perfected. "Jessica," she'd said gently, "I've taught hundreds of students. I know when someone is carrying a heavy load. My door is always open." I nearly broke down then, but swallowed hard instead. "Thank you, but I'm okay." Really. That winter of my senior year came with warnings of record snowfall. The meteorologists predicted the worst blizzard our region had seen in decades. While others excitedly anticipated snow days, I worried about being trapped at home with Mom, whose moods had grown darker as the days grew shorter. Tyler, now 14, had developed a sixth sense about Mom's moods. He'd become my shadow, helping me with chores and watching Mom carefully for signs of an impending storm, not the one outside, but the one that could erupt inside our home at any moment. "Jess," he whispered one night as we washed dishes together, "did you apply to any colleges yet?" I nodded slightly, glancing toward the living room where Mom was watching TV. "A few. Local ones," I lied. In truth, I'd applied to several out-of-state universities with strong scholarship programs. "Good," he said, relief evident in his voice. "You deserve to go somewhere amazing." What Tyler didn't know was that I'd already been quietly setting aside money from my part-time job at the library. Not just for college, but for a place where Tyler could come stay with me during breaks if things at home got worse. I'd even spoken discreetly with our Aunt Lisa, who lived 3 hours away, about contingency plans for Tyler. The day before the blizzard hit, I came home from school to find Mom sitting at the kitchen table, a pile of open mail spread before her. Among the bills and advertisements lay 3 envelopes with university letterheads, all addressed to me. "Interesting mail today," she said, her voice unnaturally calm. "University of Michigan. Cornell. UCLA. Quite the ambitious little secret you've been keeping." My heart sank as I realized I'd forgotten to check the mail before she got home from work. The college letters I'd been anxiously awaiting had arrived on exactly the wrong day. "Mom, I can explain." "Explain what?" "That you've been lying to me? Planning to abandon your family? After everything I've sacrificed for you." "I'm not abandoning anyone," I said, setting my backpack down slowly. "I just want to go to college. Lots of kids do." "Not kids with responsibilities," she snapped. "Not kids with mothers who gave up everything for them. Not kids with younger brothers who need them." The look in her eyes frightened me. There was anger there, yes, but something else too, something that looked almost like satisfaction at having caught me, as if she'd been waiting for proof of my betrayal. I went to bed that night with the college letters hidden safely under my mattress, and the weather forecast warning of 18 inches of snow by morning. Neither Tyler nor I realized that both storms, the one outside and the one brewing inside Mom, were about to collide with devastating consequences. I woke up the next morning to the sound of wind howling against my window. Overnight, the world had transformed into a whiteout. School had already been canceled, the notification had pinged on my phone at 5 a.m., and according to the weather alerts, people were being advised to stay indoors unless absolutely necessary. Downstairs, I found Mom already awake, still wearing yesterday's clothes and nursing a cup of coffee at the kitchen table. The empty wine bottle beside the sink told me all I needed to know about how she'd spent the night. "Morning," I said cautiously, heading for the cabinet to get cereal for Tyler, who would be up soon. Mom didn't respond, just watched me with bloodshot eyes as I moved around the kitchen. The silence felt dangerous, like the calm before a tornado. "We should check our emergency supplies," I finally said, unable to bear the quiet any longer. "The forecast says we might lose power." "Already handled it," Mom replied, her voice raspy. "I'm still capable of taking care of this family, despite what you might think." I bit my tongue and nodded, not wanting to provoke her. When Tyler came downstairs, rubbing sleep from his eyes, the tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. "Snow day," he announced, his excitement dimming as he registered the atmosphere between Mom and me. "Eat your breakfast, Tyler," Mom said flatly. "Then go back upstairs. Your sister and I need to talk." Tyler shot me a concerned look, but I gave him a reassuring smile. "It's okay," I mouthed silently. After Tyler reluctantly retreated upstairs, Mom pulled out the acceptance letter from the University of Michigan that she'd apparently kept from yesterday. She slapped it on the table between us. "Full scholarship," she read aloud. "Based on exceptional academic achievement and community service. Starting fall semester." She looked up at me, her eyes narrowing. "Were you even going to tell me? Or just disappear one day?" "Of course I was going to tell you," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I just wanted to wait until I heard back from all the schools. To have a complete picture before we discussed options." "Options," she repeated, spitting the word out like poison. "There are no options. You're staying here. This family needs you." "Mom, this is a full ride. Do you know how rare that is? I wouldn't have to take out loans. I could help out financially after I graduate, get a good job, and what about now?" she interrupted. "What about Tyler? What about me? Who's going to take care of us while you're off having the college experience I never got to have? Tyler's 14, not 4, I reasoned. And you're a grown woman with a good job. You don't need me to take care of you." The moment the words left my mouth, I knew I'd made a tactical error. Mom's face darkened as she stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I don't need you," she repeated, her voice rising. "After everything I've done for you? The sacrifices I've made? The opportunities one gave up to raise you? That's not what I meant. You think you're so much better than me, don't you? Little Miss Perfect with her scholarships and bright future. You can't wait to leave this house, leave this town, leave us behind. Mom, please. I just want to get an education. I'm not abandoning anyone. Liar, she shouted, slamming her hand on the table. You're just like your father. Selfish. Only thinking about yourself. I flinched at the comparison. That's not fair. Life isn't fair, Jessica. You think I wanted to be a single mother at 25? You think I dreamed of working 2 jobs while your father started a new family in California? You think I don't know what I gave up for you? I never asked you to give up anything, I said, feeling my own anger rising now. And I'm not responsible for what Dad did. No, but you're responsible for what you do, she said, her voice suddenly cold. And what you're doing is betraying this family. I heard the stairs creak and turned to see Tyler standing there, his face pale with worry. Everything okay? He asked timidly. Go back upstairs, Tyler, Mom and I said in unison. No, Tyler said, surprising us both. I don't want to go upstairs. I hate when you fight. We're not fighting, Mom said unconvincingly. We're discussing your sister's plan to abandon us. She's not abandoning us, Tyler said, stepping fully into the kitchen now. She's going to college. That's normal. Mom turned on him then. Oh, you're taking her side? After everything I've done for both of you. There aren't sides, Mom, I said, moving protectively toward Tyler. This isn't a war. It's just about college. It's about loyalty, she hissed. Something neither of you seem to understand. The argument escalated from there. Mom's voice grew louder, her accusations more outlandish. She called me ungrateful, called Tyler a traitor. She brought up ancient grievances, things I'd done wrong years ago, mistakes I'd long been forgiven for, or so I thought. Through it all, the blizzard raged outside, the wind screaming around our house like a living thing. Trapped together by the storm, there was nowhere for any of us to retreat to cool down. If you want independence so badly, Mom finally spat, maybe you should go find it. What does that even mean? I asked, exhausted by the circular argument. It means I'm sick of your attitude. Sick of your superiority complex. Sick of watching you count the days until you can leave us behind. Mom, that's not go to your room, she interrupted. I can't even look at you right now. Defeated and drained, I retreated upstairs, Tyler following close behind. In my room, I closed the door and leaned against it, sliding down until I sat on the floor. She doesn't mean it, Tyler said, sitting beside me. She's just scared of being alone. I know, I sighed, though I wasn't entirely sure that was true anymore. The look in Mom's eyes had been something beyond fear, something that looked disturbingly like hatred. I pulled out my phone and texted my best friend Amanda. Huge fight with Mom about college. She's on the warpath. Wish I could escape, but Blizzard has us trapped. Amanda replied almost immediately, hang in there. This will blow over. Just keep your head down until the storm passes, both storms. What I didn't know then, what I couldn't have known, was that downstairs, Mom was making phone calls. In the hours I spent hiding in my room, she was methodically contacting our neighbors, spinning a tale about her troubled, mentally unstable daughter who might try to cause drama by making up stories. If Jessica comes knocking, she told them, please just ignore her. It's for her own good. We're handling her issues privately as a family. By late afternoon, I'd calmed down enough to consider apologizing, not because I was wrong, but because sometimes peace at home was worth more than being right. The college discussion could wait for another day when Mom was more reasonable. That decision to extend an olive branch would lead to the most terrifying night of my life. The knock on my bedroom door came around 4:30 p.m., just as the early winter darkness was beginning to fall. Jessica. Mom called, her voice surprisingly normal. Can you come help me bring in some groceries from the car? I went to the store this morning before the roads got too bad. I glanced at Tyler, who shrugged. Perhaps this was Mom's way of making peace, asking for help rather than continuing the fight. Sure, I called back. Be right down. I was still in my pajamas, fleece pants, and a long-sleeved thermal top, since there'd been no reason to get dressed on a snow day. I hadn't even bothered to put on socks after getting out of bed that morning. Aren't you going to put on shoes? Tyler asked as I reached for the door. Just running to the car and back, I said. No big deal. Downstairs, Mom was waiting by the front door, car keys in hand. She didn't look at me directly, but at least she wasn't yelling anymore. There are a few bags in the trunk, she said. I got most of them, but there are some heavy ones left. I nodded and followed her to the door, noticing that she was fully dressed in winter gear: coat, boots, gloves. The contrast with my pajamas should have been a warning sign, but I was so relieved by the apparent ceasefire that I didn't question it. Mom opened the front door, and a blast of icy air hit me. The snow was falling heavily, already piled at least a foot deep on our front lawn. I hesitated for just a moment. Maybe I should put on some boots first, I suggested. The car's right there, Mom said impatiently, pointing to her sedan in the driveway, its roof and windows covered in several inches of snow. It'll take 2 seconds. Don't be so dramatic. Not wanting to restart the argument, I stepped outside onto the porch, wincing as my bare feet touched the freezing wood. I moved quickly down the 3 porch steps, my feet sinking into the snow as I made my way toward the car. Which side are the groceries on? I called over my shoulder, my teeth already beginning to chatter. There was no answer. Instead, I heard the distinctive sound of our front door closing. Confused, I turned around just in time to see Mom's face through the window beside the door. Her expression wasn't angry anymore. It was something much worse, completely devoid of emotion as she deliberately turned the deadbolt. For a moment, I stood frozen in shock, not from the cold, but from the incomprehensible reality of what was happening. This had to be a joke, a misunderstanding, anything but what it appeared to be. I rushed back to the porch, snow clinging to my bare ankles, and knocked on the door. "Mom?" I called. The door closed. "Let me in." Through the window, I could see her still standing there, watching me. "Mom?" I called louder, knocking harder. "It's freezing out here. Open the door." She moved closer to the window, her face just inches from the glass now. "Figure it out yourself if you're so smart," she said, her voice muffled but audible. "You want independence? Here it is." The realization that this was intentional hit me like a physical blow. "You can't be serious," I gasped, my breath forming clouds in the frigid air. "It's below freezing. There's a blizzard." "You've made it very clear you don't need me," she replied coldly. "So prove it." "Mom, please," I begged, pounding on the door now, my bare feet burning with cold on the snow-covered porch. "This isn't funny. Let me in." "Maybe this will teach you some gratitude," she said, and then stepped away from the window, disappearing into the house. "Tyler!" I screamed, hoping my brother would hear and come to my rescue. "Tyler, help me." I thought I saw movement upstairs, possibly Tyler's face at his bedroom window, but the curtain quickly fell back into place. Had Mom forbidden him from helping me? Or worse, threatened him with the same fate if he tried? The full danger of my situation began to sink in. The temperature was well below freezing and dropping by the hour. The snow was falling so heavily I could barely see our neighbor's house across the street. I was wearing only thin pajamas, and my feet were already numb from standing in the snow. I tried the door handle again, rattling it desperately, but it remained firmly locked. I moved to the windows, trying to find one that might be unlocked, but they were all secured. Our detached garage might offer some shelter, I thought desperately. I trudged through the deepening snow toward it, my feet now completely numb. But when I reached the side door, I found it locked as well. The main garage door had an electronic opener, with no manual way to open it from outside. Next, I tried the garden shed at the back of our property. By now, I was shaking uncontrollably, my pajamas soaked from the snow, my bare feet leaving shallow impressions that quickly filled with fresh snowfall. But the shed, too, was locked, something that was unusual enough to confirm that Mom had planned this thoroughly. The reality of my situation was becoming clearer with each passing minute. My mother had deliberately locked me out during a blizzard, with no shoes, no coat, no phone, and apparently no way back in. And based on her behavior, she had no intention of letting me back in anytime soon. I returned to the front porch, stomping my feet in a futile attempt to restore circulation. Looking out at the street, I considered my options. The nearest neighbor, the Patels, lived just across the street. Surely they would help me. Gathering my courage, I left the minimal shelter of our porch and waded through the snow toward their house. By the time I reached their front door, I couldn't feel my legs below the knees. I rang the doorbell and knocked frantically. Through their front window, I saw Mrs. Patel peek through the curtains. Our eyes met, and I gestured desperately, pointing to my bare feet and pajamas. She disappeared from the window, and for a moment, hope surged within me. But the door remained closed. No one came to help. Confused and increasingly desperate, I rang again, knocking even harder. This time, no one appeared at the window at all. What I didn't know then, couldn't have known, was that my mother had already called the Patels and several other neighbors, telling them I was having a psychiatric episode and that they should not, under any circumstances, open their doors to me. She needs to learn her lesson, Mom had told them. She's been threatening to run away, and this is just another attention-seeking ploy. Please, as a favor to me, just ignore her if she comes knocking. As I stood shivering on the Patel's porch, this knowledge was still hours away from being revealed to me. All I knew was that help was not coming from this house, and I needed to try elsewhere before the cold claimed me completely. I was now facing a life-or-death situation, and I made the only choice I could, to systematically knock on every door in our neighborhood until someone, anyone, helped me. The snow had deepened to nearly knee level as I left the Patel's porch, making each step an exhausting ordeal. The wind cut through my soaked pajamas like knives, and I could no longer feel my feet at all, a dangerous sign of advancing frostbite that I recognized from a wilderness survival unit we'd covered in health class. "Keep moving," I whispered to myself, my words immediately swallowed by the howling wind. Just keep moving. The Miller family lived 2 houses down from the Patels. As I struggled through the snow toward their warm, glowing windows, I tried to focus on positive memories to keep my spirit from breaking. I thought about the summer my mom taught me to ride a bike, her hands steady on the back of the seat until I found my balance. I remembered her coming to my elementary school in a Halloween costume because I'd forgotten mine. I recalled how she'd sat with me all night when I had pneumonia in 6th grade, cooling my forehead with damp cloths. Where had that mother gone? How had we ended up here? The Miller's porch light was on, a beacon in the swirling snow. I climbed their steps, leaving wet footprints on their welcome mat, and rang the bell. Through the frosted glass of their front door, I could make out figures moving inside. "Please," I called, knocking hard. "It's Jessica Wilson from across the street. I'm locked out. I need help." The movement inside stopped. Then a man's voice, "Mr. Miller," called through the door. "Go home, Jessica. Your mother called us. We're not getting involved in family matters." She locked me out in a blizzard. I cried, my voice breaking. "I don't have shoes. Please, just let me use your phone." "Your mother said you'd say something like that," he replied, his voice uncomfortable but firm. "She said you're going through some things right now. We respect her parental authority. Go home and work it out with her. She won't let me in." I shouted, pounding on the door now. "I could die out here." "That's enough, Jessica." Mrs. Miller's voice joined her husband's. "Don't make us call the police." The threat of police briefly gave me hope. At least they might get me inside somewhere warm. But then I realized how it might look to them. A hysterical teenager causing a disturbance, with a mother who'd already spread stories about mental instability. Would they believe me or her? Defeated, I turned away from the Miller's door. 2 houses down, no help. I had to keep trying. The Jackson family lived next door to the Millers. As I trudged toward their house, my movements were becoming slower, clumsier. The cold was sapping my strength and clouding my thoughts. I tried wiggling my toes as I walked, but felt nothing. They might as well have belonged to someone else. I was halfway to the Jacksons when I overheard voices and turned to see Mr. Miller standing on his porch, talking to someone on his phone. "Yeah, she just came by," he was saying. "Exactly like you said she would. Don't worry, we didn't let her in." Poor kid looked half frozen though. "Are you sure this is the right approach, Diane?" So it was true. Mom had called the neighbors and told them to turn me away. The betrayal cut deeper than the cold. By the time I reached the Jacksons' door, my legs were moving on autopilot. I rang their bell and waited, shivering violently, my arms wrapped around myself in a futile attempt to preserve body heat. No one answered, though lights were on inside. I knocked again, harder, calling out Mrs. Jackson's name specifically. She'd always been kind to me, giving me extra Halloween candy and complimenting my school achievements when we ran into each other at the grocery store. Still no answer. I moved to their window and peered in, cupping my hands around my eyes to see through the glare. The living room was empty, but as I watched, a shadow moved in the hallway. Someone was home, but deliberately not answering. My body was beginning to shut down from the cold. My thoughts were becoming disjointed, and a dangerous drowsiness was creeping over me. I remembered reading once that in the final stages of hypothermia, victims often feel warm and sleepy right before they lose consciousness for the last time. Not today, I muttered through chattering teeth. Not like this. The Morgans lived at the end of the block, an elderly couple who'd always waved to me when I passed their house. They were my next hope. I followed some partially filled-in footprints in the snow. Someone had recently shoveled a path, making the going slightly easier. My vision was starting to blur around the edges as I reached their porch. I knocked with the last of my strength, leaning against the door frame for support. To my immense relief, the door opened a crack, and Mr. Morgan's concerned face appeared in the gap, secured by a chain lock. "Good heavens, child," he exclaimed. "What are you doing out in the storm?" "My mother locked me out," I managed, my speech slightly slurred from the cold. "And need help. Please." His face softened with concern, but then his wife appeared behind him, whispering something in his ear. His expression changed. "I'm sorry, Jessica," he said, genuine regret in his voice. "Your mother called us earlier. Said you were having problems. Said you might try something like this." "It's not true," I pleaded. "Look at me. Who would be outside like this by choice?" Mrs. Morgan disappeared briefly, then returned with something in her hands. As the door opened slightly wider, she thrust a woolen blanket through the gap. "We can't get involved," Mr. Morgan said as I clutched the blanket gratefully. "But we can't let you freeze either. Wrap yourself in this and go home. Sort things out with your mother." Before I could explain again that going home wasn't an option, they closed the door. At least I had a blanket now. I wrapped it around my shoulders and feet, creating makeshift boots by tying the corners around my ankles. For houses, no real help. But the blanket gave me a fighting chance to continue. The Thompsons were next on my mental list, a family with teenagers close to my age. Surely they would understand and help. But as I approached their house, no lights were visible. Either they weren't home, or had gone to bed unusually early. Next door to them was a small house with a garden shed in the back. I didn't know who lived there. They were newer to the neighborhood, but the shed might offer temporary shelter if no one answered. No one came to the door despite my knocking, but when I tried the garden shed in desperation, I found it unlocked. Inside was cold, but at least protected from the wind and snow. I huddled there for perhaps 15 minutes, trying to restore some warmth to my body, planning my next move. The temporary shelter was both a blessing and a curse. The break from the direct assault of the elements gave me a chance to recover slightly, but the pause also allowed the reality of my situation to sink in more deeply. My own mother had done this to me. My neighbors were turning me away. I was alone in a life-threatening situation. I began to cry, the tears freezing on my cheeks almost instantly. In that dark garden shed, I hit my lowest point, wondering if anyone would even miss me if I didn't survive the night. But then I thought of Tyler, alone in that house with Mom. If she could do this to me, what might she do to him someday? I had to survive, not just for myself, but for him too. With renewed determination, I left the shed and continued my desperate journey. The Carters lived across the street, a family I didn't know well but who had a daughter about Tyler's age. As I approached their house, I could see the family gathered in their living room, watching TV. Through their window, I observed them laughing together, completely unaware of the life-and-death drama unfolding outside. I knocked on their door, trying to look as non-threatening as possible despite my increasingly haggard appearance. Someone peeked through the curtains. The daughter, I think, and then the curtain quickly fell back into place. I knocked again, more urgently. Through the window, I could see a discussion taking place, the parents looking concerned, the father reaching for a phone. Were they calling for help? or calling my mother. Either way, they didn't open the door. By now, I was experiencing moments of confusion and disorientation, clear signs of advancing hypothermia. I'd been outside for nearly 2 hours in sub-zero temperatures with inadequate clothing. Medical attention was becoming urgently necessary. At the end of the street stood a house I hadn't noticed before, or perhaps I had but couldn't remember in my increasingly confused state. The mailbox read Barnes, a name I didn't recognize. New neighbors, perhaps? People my mother hadn't had a chance to poison against me yet? It was my last hope on the street. If these people turned me away too, I would have to somehow find the strength to make it to the next block, where my friend Amanda lived. But Amanda's house was at least half a mile away, and in my condition, that distance might as well have been 100 miles. I staggered up the Barnes walkway, the blanket now frozen stiff around my shoulders, my movements mechanical and uncoordinated. I raised my hand to knock, but found I barely had the strength to make a sound. Instead, I leaned against the doorbell, using my body weight to keep it ringing. The porch light came on, and then the door opened. A young man in his 30s stood there, looking confused and concerned. "Help," I managed to whisper before my legs finally gave out. As I collapsed on their doorstep, I heard the man call out, "Sarah, get the first aid kit. Hurry." Then darkness claimed me. I drifted back to consciousness in stages, first aware only of warmth, blessed, wonderful warmth, and then of voices speaking urgently nearby. "Her core temperature is dangerously low," a woman was saying. "We need to warm her gradually. Too fast could cause shock." "Should we put her in a hot bath?" a man's voice asked. "No, that could be dangerous. Lukewarm water for her hands and feet, and blankets for her core. I'm more worried about frostbite on her extremities." "How long was she out there?" "No idea. She just collapsed on our doorstep. I've called 911, but they said it might be a while with the roads like this." I forced my eyes open, finding myself lying on a couch, surrounded by more blankets than I'd ever seen in one place. A woman with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail was examining my feet, while a man with glasses hovered anxiously nearby. "She's awake," the man said, noticing my open eyes. "Hey there. I'm Michael Barnes. This is my wife Sarah. Can you tell us your name?" "Jessica," I managed, my voice hoarse. "Jessica Wilson." "Jessica, I'm a nurse," Sarah said, her voice calm and professional despite the unusual circumstances. "You're suffering from hypothermia and possible frostbite. We've called an ambulance, but the roads are bad. Can you tell us what happened? Why were you outside without shoes in a blizzard?" I tried to explain, but my thoughts were still jumbled, and my speech came out slurred. "My mom locked me out. Neighbors wouldn't help. Said she called them." Michael and Sarah exchanged concerned glances. "Your mother deliberately locked you out?" Michael asked, his expression troubled. "In these conditions?" I nodded weakly. "College fight. She's angry. Called neighbors, told them not to help." That's abuse," Sarah said quietly to her husband, though I could still hear her. "Potentially attempted murder in weather like this." Michael nodded grimly. "We just moved in last week. No one's called us about anything." Sarah turned her attention back to my feet, which were now submerged in a basin of lukewarm water. The pain was starting to return as sensation came back, an excruciating burning that made me gasp. "I know it hurts," Sarah said sympathetically. "That's actually a good sign. It means there's still circulation. Dead tissue doesn't hurt." While Sarah continued treating me, Michael brought me a mug of warm, not hot, chicken broth. "Sip this slowly," he instructed. "It'll help raise your core temperature." As the warmth spread through me and my mind cleared, I provided a more coherent explanation of what had happened: the fight about college, Mom's escalating behavior over recent months, being tricked into going outside, and my desperate journey from house to house seeking help. "We need to call the police," Michael said when I'd finished. "This goes beyond a family dispute." The sound of sirens outside interrupted our conversation. Despite the blizzard, emergency services had managed to reach us. Paramedics entered the Barnes living room, bringing with them a blast of cold air and professional efficiency. Severe hypothermia and frostbite, Sarah explained to them, speaking in medical terminology I didn't fully understand. I've been warming her gradually. No signs of cardiac arrhythmia, but her feet concern me. Possible second-degree frostbite on both feet, worse on the right. The female paramedic nodded as she checked my vital signs. We'll take it from here. Good job with the initial treatment. As they transferred me to a stretcher, I looked anxiously at Michael and Sarah. Thank you, I said, my voice stronger now. You saved my life. We'll follow you to the hospital, Michael assured me. You're not alone in this. The ambulance ride was a blur of beeping monitors and concerned voices. The paramedics continued the warming process Sarah had started, checking my heart rhythm and keeping a close eye on my extremities. They asked questions about what had happened, their expressions growing increasingly grave as I explained. Your mother did this deliberately, the male paramedic asked, making notes on a clipboard. I nodded, too exhausted to explain again. We'll need to report this, he said. Child Protective Services will want to interview you. The word child struck me as strange. At 17, I didn't think of myself as a child anymore. But legally, I was still a minor under my mother's care. A minor she had put in life-threatening danger. At the hospital, I was quickly admitted and surrounded by a team of doctors and nurses. They continued the slow warming process, took blood samples, and examined my feet and hands for tissue damage. A nurse cut away my frozen pajamas, replacing them with a hospital gown and more blankets. You're lucky, the emergency room doctor told me after his examination. Another hour out there, and we'd be having a very different conversation. As it is, you have moderate to severe frostbite on both feet, but I think we can avoid tissue loss with proper treatment. While medical staff worked to stabilize my condition, 2 police officers arrived to take my statement. They were professional but kind, asking detailed questions about the events leading up to my mother locking me out. Has anything like this happened before? The female officer asked. Not like this, I said. She's been different lately. Angry. Drinking more. But she's never put me in danger before. And your brother? Is he safe at home with her? Tyler. In all the chaos, I hadn't had time to worry about him. I don't know, I admitted. She was really angry. But she's never hurt him physically. We'll do a welfare check, the male officer assured me. Make sure he's okay. As the police were finishing their questions, I heard a commotion in the hallway outside my room. A familiar voice was demanding to see me, growing louder and more insistent. That's my daughter in there. I have a right to see her. My mother. A cold fear gripped me that had nothing to do with hypothermia. The officers exchanged glances. Would you like us to stay while she's here? The female officer asked me. I nodded gratefully. When Mom burst into the room, she was playing a completely different role than the woman who had coldly locked me out hours earlier. Her face was the picture of maternal concern, her voice trembling with emotion. Jessica. Oh my God, baby, what happened to you? I've been so worried. The officer stepped forward slightly, creating a subtle barrier between her and my hospital bed. Mrs. Wilson, the male officer said formally. We'd like to ask you some questions about how your daughter ended up outside during a blizzard with no shoes or coat. Mom's expression shifted, the concern giving way to something calculated. She ran away, she said, her voice convincingly distressed. We had a little argument about college applications, nothing serious, and she stormed out. I thought she'd gone to a friend's house until the neighbors called saying they'd seen her wandering around outside. The lie was so smooth, so practiced, that for a moment I almost doubted my own memory. Had I somehow misunderstood what happened? But then I looked down at my feet, bandaged and elevated on pillows, and the truth solidified again in my mind. That's not what happened, I said quietly but firmly. You told me to help bring in groceries from the car. When I stepped outside, you locked the door behind me. You told me through the window to figure it out myself. You called the neighbors and told them not to help me. Mom's face hardened for just a second before she forced it back into an expression of concern. Jessica, honey, you're confused. The hypothermia must have affected your memory. Why would I ever do something like that to my own daughter? Mrs. Wilson, the female officer interjected, "We've already spoken with two of your neighbors. They've confirmed receiving calls from you instructing them not to assist Jessica if she came to their doors." The color drained from Mom's face. That's not. I was just worried about her mental state. She's been so difficult lately, threatening to run away. "Your daughter has severe frostbite and hypothermia," the doctor said, entering the room and catching the last part of the conversation. Another hour in those conditions and she likely would have died. As her physician, I'm obligated to report this as a case of child endangerment. Mom's mask slipped completely then, her face contorting with anger. "She's manipulating all of you. She's always been like this, turning people against me. I've sacrificed everything for her, and this is how she repays me? By making me look like the villain." The officers moved forward, one placing a hand gently but firmly on Mom's arm. "Mrs. Wilson, I think it would be best if you came with us to answer some questions down at the station." As they led her away, she looked back at me with an expression I'll never forget, not anger or remorse, but something closer to betrayal, as if I were the one who had committed an unforgivable act. A social worker named Ms. Peterson arrived shortly after Mom was taken away. She explained that Tyler had been temporarily placed with our Aunt Lisa, who had driven through the storm to collect him after being contacted by Child Protective Services. "He's safe and very worried about you," Ms. Peterson assured me. "Your aunt has been granted emergency temporary custody of both of you pending investigation." The medical staff continued their work, administering pain medication for my feet and monitoring my vital signs. The young couple who had saved me, Michael and Sarah Barnes, came to check on me once I was stabilized. "We couldn't stop thinking about you," Sarah said, placing a small stuffed bear on my bedside table. "Hospital rooms are always so sterile. Thought you might want a little company." I clutched the bear gratefully, tears welling in my eyes. "I don't know how to thank you. If you hadn't opened your door." "Don't even think about it," Michael said firmly. "Any decent person would have done the same." But we all knew that wasn't true. 7 other houses had turned me away. 7 doors had remained closed. The Barnes were the exception, not the rule, and their kindness stood in stark contrast to the community's failure that night. As they left, promising to visit again, I sank back against my pillows, physically and emotionally exhausted. The events of the day played on repeat in my mind. The argument, the betrayal, the desperate journey through the snow, and finally, rescue by strangers when those who should have helped me turned away. Sleep eventually claimed me, but it was filled with dreams of endless snow and closed doors, of knocking and knocking with no answer, of slowly freezing while familiar faces watched impassively through windows. The next week passed in a blur of medical treatments, police interviews, and sessions with Ms. Peterson, the social worker assigned to my case. My physical recovery was painful but steady. The doctors had managed to save all my toes, though 2 on my right foot had suffered more severe frostbite and would require ongoing treatment. "You're lucky," Dr. Rivera, the specialist overseeing my case, told me during morning rounds. "Most people who get frostbite this severe end up losing some tissue. Your quick thinking and keeping moving, and the first aid you received from the Barnes family, made all the difference." Lucky wasn't exactly how I felt, lying in a hospital bed with bandaged feet and an uncertain future, but I understood what she meant. Things could have been much worse. On my 3rd day in the hospital, I learned that my mother had been formally charged with child endangerment and neglect. The detective assigned to my case explained that the combination of my testimony, the neighbors' statements about her calls to them, and the severity of my injuries had made the case straightforward. "What will happen to her?" I asked, surprised to find I still cared. "That's up to the courts," he said. "But cases like this typically result in mandated treatment programs, probation, and supervised visitation if the court allows any contact at all." The news left me with complicated feelings. Part of me felt vindicated that she was facing consequences for what she'd done, but another part, the part that remembered her braiding my hair and leaving notes in my lunchbox, felt a deep sadness for how far she had fallen. Tyler visited that afternoon, brought to the hospital by our Aunt Lisa. When he saw me, he burst into tears, rushing to hug me carefully amid the tubes and monitors. "I thought you were going to die," he sobbed against my shoulder. "I saw her lock you out." I tried to unlock the door when she wasn't looking, but she caught me and took the keys. "I'm so sorry, Jess." "Hey, it's not your fault," I assured him, stroking his hair. "You're just a kid. This is on Mom, not you." Aunt Lisa watched our reunion with tear-filled eyes. "I had no idea things had gotten so bad," she said. "Diane always made it sound like everything was fine when we talked." "She's good at that," I said without bitterness, just stating a fact. Making things look fine from the outside. We discussed the immediate future. Tyler would continue staying with Aunt Lisa while I completed my hospital recovery. After that, we would need more permanent arrangements. The social worker mentioned foster care as a possibility, I said hesitantly. "Absolutely not," Aunt Lisa said firmly. "Your family. You'll both stay with me as long as needed. My house isn't big, but we'll make it work." The relief I felt at knowing Tyler and I would stay together was immense. At least one worry could be crossed off my growing list. Mrs. Larson, my English teacher, visited the next day, bringing a stack of books and assignments so I wouldn't fall behind. "The whole school is talking about what happened," she told me, settling into the chair beside my bed. "I wish I had pushed harder when I noticed changes in your behavior. Maybe this could have been prevented." "You tried," I reminded her. "I wasn't ready to talk about it then." "Well, I'm here now," she said, taking my hand. "And I've spoken with the principal and your other teachers. We're all committed to helping you finish your senior year successfully, no matter what it takes." Her visit reminded me of another looming concern: college. With everything that had happened, I had nearly forgotten about the acceptance letters that had triggered this nightmare. "My college applications," I said suddenly. "The deadlines for accepting scholarships." "One thing at a time," Mrs. Larson advised. "Focus on healing first. I'm sure the universities will be understanding given the circumstances." She was right, as it turned out. When Michael and Sarah Barnes visited again later that week, they brought their laptop and helped me draft emails to the universities that had accepted me, explaining my situation. The responses were uniformly sympathetic, with all 3 schools extending my decision deadline. The University of Michigan even has a special fund for students in crisis situations, Sarah noted as we read through the replies. "You might qualify for additional support." By the end of the week, a court hearing had been scheduled to determine my mother's legal fate and our long-term living situation. Given my age, just a few months shy of 18, there was discussion of granting me emancipated minor status, which would allow me to legally make decisions for myself. "What about Tyler?" I asked Ms. Peterson when she explained this option. "I don't want to be separated from him." "That's more complicated," she admitted. "He's only 14. But given the circumstances and your aunt's willingness to provide a home for both of you, we might be able to work out an arrangement where you have some degree of guardianship alongside your aunt." The day before my hospital discharge, my mother's court hearing took place. I attended via video link from my hospital room, not yet physically able to be present in court. Tyler joined from Aunt Lisa's house, with Ms. Peterson sitting beside him for support. Mom appeared on the screen looking smaller somehow, the fire that had driven her to such cruelty seemingly extinguished. She sat beside her court-appointed attorney, her eyes downcast, her responses barely audible. The evidence against her was presented methodically: my medical records, statements from neighbors confirming her calls instructing them to turn me away, testimony from the Barnes family about my condition when they found me, and police photographs of the scene, including my frozen pajamas and the tracks I'd left in the snow during my desperate journey. When asked if she wanted to make a statement, Mom finally looked up, but not at the judge, at me, through the video link. "I didn't think it would go that far," she said, her voice flat. "I just wanted to teach her a lesson about appreciating what she had, about not abandoning family." There was no real apology in her words, no acknowledgement of the severity of what she'd done. Just a justification that somehow cast me as the wrongdoer and herself as the wounded party. The judge was not impressed. "Mrs. Wilson, your actions went far beyond teaching a lesson. You deliberately placed your child in life-threatening danger. The premeditation involved in calling neighbors to ensure she couldn't find help shows a disturbing level of intent. Mom looked away, her jaw tightening. The judge continued, "This court orders you to complete a comprehensive mental health and substance abuse treatment program. You will serve 6 months in county jail, followed by 3 years of probation. During that time, you will have no unsupervised contact with either of your children. Supervised visitation will be considered only after completion of the treatment program and upon recommendation of a court-appointed therapist." When asked if I wanted to make a statement, I took a deep breath and looked directly at the mother I barely recognized anymore. "For years, I tried to be the perfect daughter because I thought that would make you happy," I said, my voice steady despite the emotions churning inside me. "I helped with Tyler, I kept the house clean, I got good grades, I worked part-time, all while watching you change from the mom who taught me to ride a bike into someone who could lock me out to freeze to death. I'm not sharing this to hurt you, but because I want the court to understand that this wasn't just one bad night or one bad decision. It was the culmination of years of escalating behavior." I paused, gathering my thoughts. "I don't hate you. I actually hope you get the help you need. But I can't pretend this didn't happen, and I can't feel safe with you anymore. Tyler and I deserve better than to live in fear of your moods and your punishment." Mom didn't look at me as I spoke, but I saw her shoulders shake slightly. Whether from anger or remorse, I couldn't tell. The judge thanked me for my statement and proceeded to address the custody arrangements. Given my age and the circumstances, I was granted emancipated minor status, with Aunt Lisa appointed as Tyler's legal guardian. A unique arrangement was created that allowed me significant input in decisions regarding Tyler's care, acknowledging our close sibling bond and my role in his life. After the hearing, Ms. Peterson explained what would happen next. "Your mother will begin serving her sentence immediately. The house will need to be dealt with, sold, or rented out to provide some financial support for you and Tyler. Your aunt has legal authority to handle that process." It was strange to think of our family home, the only home Tyler and I had ever known, being sold or occupied by strangers. But the thought of returning there, of sleeping in my bedroom just feet away from where Mom had locked me out, was unbearable. The day of my hospital discharge arrived, bringing with it both relief and anxiety. My feet were healing well, though the doctors warned me that complete recovery would take months, and I might experience increased cold sensitivity in my affected toes for years to come. Michael and Sarah Barnes arrived to drive me to Aunt Lisa's house, having volunteered when they learned I was being released. "We want to stay in touch," Sarah said as Michael helped me into their car. "What you went through, it creates a kind of bond. You're part of our lives now, whether you like it or not." I smiled, genuinely touched by their continued kindness. "I'd like that. You're my neighbors who weren't really neighbors yet. My rescuers who shouldn't have had to rescue me." The drive to Aunt Lisa's took us past my old neighborhood. As we passed my former house, I caught a glimpse of the Barnes home at the end of the street, the only house that had opened its door to me that night. A powerful mix of emotions washed over me. Gratitude, grief, anger, relief. "You okay?" Michael asked, noticing my silence. Getting there, I answered honestly. One day at a time. At Aunt Lisa's, a small welcome party awaited. Tyler, Aunt Lisa, Mrs. Larson, and even Amanda, my best friend who had been keeping in touch via text throughout my hospital stay. The modest 2-bedroom apartment was decorated with a hand-painted "Welcome Home" sign, and the coffee table was laden with my favorite foods. "We're making this work," Aunt Lisa explained as she showed me the pull-out couch in the living room that would be my bed for now. "It's tight, but it's safe. And it's together." As I settled into this new, temporary home, I felt a strange mixture of loss and possibility. The life I had known was gone, but in its place was something potentially better, uncertain and challenging, but free from the toxic atmosphere that had been slowly poisoning our family for years. Later that evening, as Tyler and I sat together on my pull-out bed watching a movie, he leaned his head against my shoulder. "Are we going to be okay, Jess?" he asked quietly. I put my arm around him, thinking carefully before answering. "Yeah, Ty. Not right away, and not without some tough days ahead. But eventually, we're going to be more than okay." We're going to be happy. For the first time since that night in the blizzard, I truly believed it. 1 year later, I stood in front of the mirror in my small studio apartment, adjusting the cap on my head. The royal blue graduation gown hung loosely on my frame, a symbol of achievement that once seemed impossible during those dark days after the blizzard. "You look like a proper college student already," Tyler said from his perch on my bed, now 15 and growing taller by the day, his voice deepening into something almost unfamiliar. "Not quite yet," I laughed, "but in 3 months I will be." The past year had unfolded in ways I never could have predicted that night as I knocked desperately on doors in the snow. After being discharged from the hospital, Tyler and I had lived with Aunt Lisa for 5 months while I finished my senior year. The arrangement was cramped but filled with more genuine warmth than our old house had known in years. My physical recovery had been challenging. For weeks, I'd needed crutches to walk as my frost-bitten feet healed. 2 toes on my right foot had suffered permanent nerve damage, occasionally tingling or going numb without warning. Dr. Rivera had warned me this might be a lifelong reminder of that night, though far less severe than what could have happened. "The human body is remarkably resilient," she told me during my final checkup. Just like the human spirit. The emotional healing had been more complicated. Nightmares plagued me for months, dreams of pounding on doors that never opened, of slowly freezing while familiar faces watched through windows. I'd startle awake, heart racing, convinced I was still trapped in that endless snow. Dr. Karina Martinez, the therapist Ms. Peterson had connected me with, had been instrumental in helping me process the trauma. "What happened to you wasn't just physical danger," she explained during one of our weekly sessions. "It was a profound betrayal by the person who should have protected you most. That creates a special kind of wound." Through therapy, I began to understand that my mother's actions that night weren't really about me or my college plans. They were the culmination of her own unresolved issues, her alcoholism, and possibly undiagnosed mental health problems. This understanding didn't excuse what she'd done, but it helped me stop blaming myself for somehow causing her behavior. Tyler had joined me in some therapy sessions, working through his own trauma and guilt about that night. "I should have helped you," he'd said during one particularly emotional session. "I should have found a way to get you back inside. You were 14, facing an out-of-control adult," Dr. Martinez had reminded him gently. "You did the right thing by staying safe. Jessica wouldn't have wanted you to put yourself in danger." I'd nodded in agreement, squeezing his hand. "Never ever think this was your fault, Ty." Our mother had refused to participate in the court-ordered treatment program, choosing instead to serve her full jail sentence. She'd sent one letter, addressed to both of us, full of justifications rather than apologies. "Someday you'll understand that everything I did was for this family." Tyler had read it once and then asked me to throw it away. Our former family home had been sold, the proceeds placed in a trust managed by Aunt Lisa, part for Tyler's future college expenses, part for immediate living needs. The neighborhood that had turned me away that night was no longer home, and I felt no nostalgia driving past it on rare occasions. The Barnes family had kept their promise to stay in our lives. Michael and Sarah had become something between friends and surrogate parents, having us over for dinner regularly, helping me navigate college financial aid forms, and even teaching Tyler to drive when Aunt Lisa's arthritis made it too painful for her. "Your graduation ceremony is at 2, right?" Tyler asked, bringing me back to the present moment. "Yeah, but we need to be there by 1, I reminded him, carefully removing my cap and gown and hanging them up for tomorrow. "Mrs. Larson wants to take photos with all her AP English students before the ceremony." Mrs. Larson had been another constant support throughout the year, advocating for me with other teachers when my hospital stay and recovery affected my schoolwork, writing glowing recommendation letters for scholarship applications, and simply checking in regularly to make sure I was okay. Thanks to her help and my own determination, I'd not only caught up but excelled, earning a partial scholarship to the University of Michigan, my first-choice school all along. The special crisis fund Sarah had mentioned during my hospital stay had indeed provided additional financial support, and between that, my scholarship, and careful budgeting of the house sale proceeds, college was financially possible. 2 months ago, I'd taken another big step, moving into this small studio apartment near campus. The timing wasn't ideal, starting the lease before the school year began, but the opportunity was too good to pass up. The rent was subsidized through a community program for students who had experienced homelessness or housing insecurity, a category I technically qualified for after the events of last winter. Tyler still lived with Aunt Lisa, spending weekends with me when possible. Our unique guardianship arrangement had worked surprisingly well, with the three of us forming a kind of unconventional family unit that met Tyler's needs while respecting my new adult status. "Need help with anything else for tomorrow?" Tyler asked, flopping back on my bed. "I think everything's ready," I said, sitting beside him. Just trying not to think too much about the speech. That was the other surprise of the year. Despite everything, I'd been named one of the graduation speakers. When the principal had called me into her office to tell me, I'd initially wanted to decline. Public speaking had never been my thing, and after everything that had happened, I wasn't sure I wanted the additional attention. "You don't have to do it," Mrs. Larson had advised when I sought her counsel. "But if you did, think of what it would mean to other students facing their own struggles. Your story is powerful, Jessica, not just the trauma, but your resilience afterward." Eventually, I'd agreed, spending weeks crafting a speech that acknowledged the darkness of my experience without letting it define me. Tomorrow, I would stand before my classmates, their families, and the community that had both failed and supported me, and share what I had learned about survival and rebuilding. The morning of graduation dawned clear and bright, a stark contrast to the blizzard that had changed everything. As I dressed in my room, I could hear Tyler and Aunt Lisa moving around the apartment, their voices mingling with those of Michael and Sarah Barnes, who had arrived early to drive us all to the ceremony. "You ready for this?" Sarah asked when I emerged, helping me straighten my honor cords. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, taking a deep breath. At the school, Mrs. Larson greeted me with a warm hug. "So proud of you," she whispered before gathering her AP students for photos. The ceremony itself passed in a blur of speeches, music, and names being called. When it was my turn to speak, I approached the podium with steady steps, no trace of a limp remaining from my injuries. "1 year ago, I began. Looking out at the sea of faces, I learned that sometimes the shelter you were born into can fail you, and that sometimes you have to build your own." I spoke about resilience without romanticizing trauma, about the importance of community without ignoring how communities can fail. I talked about forgiveness as a process rather than an event, and about how moving forward doesn't require forgetting the past. The night I was locked out taught me that closed doors can lead to open ones. If you keep knocking, I concluded. Sometimes the door that opens belongs to strangers who become family. Sometimes it's a door within yourself that leads to strength you never knew you had. And sometimes it's the door to a future that once seemed impossible, but now stands open before you, waiting for you to step through. The applause was thunderous, but the only reactions that truly mattered to me were the proud tears in Tyler's eyes and the supportive smiles from the makeshift family that had formed around us from the fragments of our broken one. After the ceremony, amid the chaos of photos and congratulations, I found a moment alone with Tyler. "Mom would be proud of you," he said suddenly, then looked alarmed at his own words. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have brought her up today." I shook my head, putting an arm around his shoulders. "It's okay to miss who she was before, Ty. I do too sometimes. And it's okay if part of you still loves her." "Do you?" he asked hesitantly. "Still love her, I mean?" I considered the question carefully. "I love who she was when we were little. I have compassion for who she became. But I've learned that love doesn't mean allowing someone to harm you. Real love doesn't lock you out in a blizzard." He nodded, understanding beyond his years. "I'm glad you're my sister." "Me too, kid. Always will be." Later that evening, our unusual family gathered for a celebration dinner at a restaurant nicer than any I'd been to before, Michael and Sarah's graduation gift to me. Around the table sat people who had no blood connection but had become more family to me than my own mother, Aunt Lisa with her practical wisdom, Michael and Sarah Barnes who had opened their door when no one else would, Mrs. Larson whose quiet support had helped me stay on track academically, and even Dr. Martinez who had guided my emotional healing. And Tyler, of course, my brother, my responsibility, my motivation on the darkest days. As we shared food and conversation, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought us here. The path from that frozen night to this warm celebration had been neither straight nor easy. There had been setbacks and difficult days, moments when the weight of everything seemed too heavy to bear. But there had also been unexpected joy, newfound strength, and the creation of a chosen family built on genuine care rather than obligation. The future that once seemed impossible, college, independence, healing, was now unfolding before me. I still had no contact with my mother, who had chosen to serve her full sentence rather than participate in treatment. Whether we would ever rebuild any kind of relationship remained an open question, one I didn't need to answer yet. That door neither fully closed nor fully open, just as my heart remained regarding her. What I knew with certainty was that the girl who had knocked desperately on doors during a blizzard had found not just physical shelter, but emotional sanctuary. The frostbite had healed, leaving only occasional reminders. The deeper wounds were healing too, gradually and imperfectly, but healing nonetheless. As I looked around at the faces of those who had helped me rebuild from the shattered pieces of that night, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel again so soon: genuine happiness. Not the absence of pain or the forgetting of trauma, but the presence of joy and connection despite it all. A toast, Michael proposed, raising his glass. To Jessica, her past courage, her present achievement, and her bright future. And to doors that open when they're needed most, Sarah added with a meaningful smile. I raised my own glass, thinking of all the doors in my life, those that had closed, those that had opened, and those still waiting to be discovered. To all of you who became my shelter, I said, my voice steady and sure. Thank you for showing me that home isn't always where you start, but where you finally feel safe enough to become who you're meant to be. Have you ever had someone in your life who failed you when you needed them most? Or perhaps you were the unexpected helper for someone in crisis. I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story of survival and rebuilding resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that even after the coldest night, warmth returns. Thank you for being here with me, and remember, sometimes the most important door to open is the one that leads to your own strength.